All right. Morning, everyone. As John mentioned, the AC has a lot of work on its docket, so I'm going to try and run through a number of the things that we're going to discuss today and tomorrow, and hopefully try and make some sense of it and prepare everybody for the individual conversations. The AC has one proposal on its docket. It's a new proposal that came in just before our last meeting, and that one actually will not be discussed on the agenda today because it's still in a proposal state and hasn't been actually moved to a draft. During the newcomer meeting yesterday, we were talking about some of these different proposal states, and at ARIN in this policy development process, it typically goes from a proposal to a draft to a recommended, and then moved on to the board in a very generic sense. So that proposal is still in its initial stage, so we're not going to be talking about it here. We have one draft proposal that'll be discussed Friday morning. It's 2016-3. That one is related to several others, and I'll get into those details in a bit, but we're going to discuss that one Friday morning. That being in a draft state actually can't move to the board after this meeting. One of the requirements of the policy process is a proposal has to be discussed here at a meeting in a recommended state before the advisory council can advance it to the board. And since that's a draft, we won't be able to do that after this meeting. But it's also, I wanted to point out, as this one relates to the others that are in a recommended state, that's more of a procedural issue, and it was in no way because the AC felt that we should be doing one or the other. That preference is really, for this discussion here in the room, and it's important to get all of your feedback to decide which ideas are better. Because in the end, the goal of all of this is to get a consensus of the room and on the mailing list of which are the best proposals to advance. So there's 7 recommended drafts that we're going to work through. 4 of them, as John mentioned, we got 4 being discussed this morning. There's 2 this afternoon and 1 on Friday morning. All of these are in a recommended state, and based on the feedback here, could be advanced to the board after this meeting. Now we have 4 of these recommended, or I shouldn't, sorry, not all recommended. 4 of these proposals are directly related. And in order to advance any one of them, we have to make sure the requirements are met where they're fair and impartial, technically sound, and supported by the community. But while each one of them can stand alone as a particular change, all 4 of these can't move together as a set because they're all approaching a solution to a problem from a slightly different angle. So these discussions that we're going to have will help the AC understand which approach is preferred. To try and make sense of some of this, because with the number of proposals that are trying to solve essentially a similar problem from different approaches, we put together an additional insert in the discussion guide that everyone should have to try and chart out some of the differences and similarities between each of these proposals. If you back up a second, and the veterans here, bear with me a while because I want to help the newcomers kind of make some sense of this as well. When you look at ARIN's policies on how the resources are allocated, if you back up a step, it's essentially, when we're talking about a needs basis, you're looking at how is an organization using their existing resources. That helps explain how they would need resources in the future. There's different levers that we pull. So, based on previous growth, you could justify X future growth for, Y time frame. These are the different conditions that we apply to a lot of these policies. So this slide here is kind of talking about the existing policies, how we manage some of those conditions. What these 4 proposals try to do is, slightly adjust those approaches in different ways. When you look at the policy manual, Section 4 is really focused on IPv4 requirements. Section 6 of the policy manual is IPv6 requirements, and Section 8 of the policy manual is really focused on the requirements around transferring registrations from one organization to another. The approach of 15-7, one of the things that it does is current policy takes transfers, the transfer requirements of Section 8, and looks at the usage requirements in Section 4. 15-7 essentially adds some additional conditions into Section 8 as a means for people to justify the resources required in a transfer. Section 2016-3 also does something similar in that it adds an additional conditional to Section 8 for V4 transfers, but it does it in a little different way, or in a new approach, where essentially you can get up to a /16 as long as you're using what you currently have. So you could essentially double your existing allocation up to a /16 if you're already using your existing space. 2016-4 takes a slightly different approach where it's modifying Section 4 requirements, but just applying a minimum, which is actually, as the several Johns, there's too many Johns in this room. John Springer and John Sweeting were just discussing that helps the case of applying minimum allocations to organizations so they can acquire space via transfer if they couldn't get it from their upstream ISP. And then finally, 16-5 takes a completely different approach to this situation in that it tries to detach the needs requirements in Section 4 and put them in Section 8 as they apply to transfers. One of the things about these different approaches is that there's been a conversation, now that the free pool is gone, how do we manage requirements for transfers in a depleted state? 2016-5, in that separation of requirements, actually sets up for a potential solution down the road in the event if ARIN ever got a free pool again, if people started returning space because they were migrating to V6. It leaves the free pool requirements in Section 4 essentially intact, where some of the other ones alter Section 4 in a way that if the free pool ever returned, we would then have to consider how we would want to manage that going forward. So the next couple of slides simply kind of break out how these different proposals take those approaches. Here, we're looking at how much space can be acquired. These are the differences that are also laid out in this chart as far as looking backwards based on how much is required, what is the requirements on the existing space that people have in order to justify that. Then there's the forward-looking requirements where the current policy, transfers can do up to a 24-month supply as long as that request is utilized up to 50% within 1 year. And then 15.7, 16.3, 16.4, 16.5 all tweak that slightly in that, they change the time frames in which that space has to be utilized. And then finally, each one, for the most part, a number of them just leave the evidence required intact, but some of them, in particular 15.7, changes the justification slightly in that 15.7 essentially says as long as an officer attests to the requirement, that's good enough for staff. They don't have to dig into the details or provide like utilization proof. So we're going to be talking about these this afternoon and tomorrow. Sorry, this all day today. It's going to be a long day. But there's also a number of different ways, not just here at the microphone, but you'll also have the opportunity to grab AC members and discuss these in different places. One of which is during lunch, we like to have several tables designated for different topics. So we set aside 4 tables, 2 of which are set to discuss these 4 policies. And you can get with the shepherds and voice your opinions, your experiences, ask questions. There's also 2 other tables, because aside from all of these policies, one of the things the advisory council is always curious about is, how can we expand participation, bring more people into the community. The number of first-timers here is actually really encouraging. It was good to see. We'd like to continue that trend. Another topic that we're interested in is how are these RIR transfers working? What are people's experiences? For those who are actually at NANOG, there were 2 really good presentations yesterday from Amy and David regarding some of the experiences of the transfer market. And finally, we also, if you would like to, break out and have a conversation about any of the policies, feel free to grab any one of the AC members, because we'd always be happy to, sit down and discuss any of these proposals in more detail. Any questions?
Any questions for Dan?
Hi there, Donnie Roisman, SoftLayer. Not a question, just a comment, compliment. I wanted to thank whoever worked on the quick reference guide fly-in that you guys put in the booklet. Thank you, it's a very helpful chart. Appreciate it.
That would be Amy.
Okay, thank you, Dan.